This is my top 7 favorite paranormal podcasts. This video is not exactly warranted because I made a video on this about 4 years ago, and to be honest, my list hasn't changed very much. So I'm kind of being repetitive in this video, but there have been a couple changes. Plus, if anything, this demonstrates that when I said something was my favorite, I really meant it. These are the podcasts that I religiously listen to. So we'll get into the list now. I'll ramble at the end. My first top favorite paranormal podcast is Where Did the Road Go? This is hosted by Soraya Azkath. He does interviews with guests who are writers, who are researchers, experiencers, and then he also does roundtable discussions where he'll get a few people on and they'll just talk together on a certain subject. I love all formats of this podcast. When I say paranormal, it really means like anything fringe, anything weird. So we get talk of like UFOs and contactees, ghost hunting, cryptids, Bigfoot, weird history. Like, well, there's a little bit of everything in there. And I just feel like I need to emphasize when I'm saying paranormal, I don't just mean ghosts and demons. Something I really love about Where Did the Road Go is they get kind of theoretical, philosophical. They're kind of free thinking. So they'll just think outside the box. They'll always question, why we tend to believe what we believe. And it has really shaped the way that I think about and perceive the paranormal community. Where Did the Road Go is like the foundation of my worldview, I guess. Also, I was on Where Did the Road Go, which is like, it's like my brain won't accept it. But I was actually on a couple months ago as a guest, but it was a special. We were talking about movies. Didn't have anything to do with the paranormal, but can I just take a moment? Because I was on my favorite podcast. That's still something that doesn't quite register in my mind. Anyway, I've said this in the other video I made on my favorite podcast, but I really like Soraya's approach when he interviews people. He is never interrupting people. He's never like arguing with people. He does ask good questions, but he's never combative. He's never rude, and that makes for a really pleasant listening experience. Okay, next, my favorite podcast number 2 is Conspirinormal. Conspirinormal was introduced to me through Where Did the Road Go, because Where Did the Road Go would partner with different podcasts over the years. And Conspirinormal stuck out to me in particular because they are based in Nashville, which is the next state up from me. And this was like the first time where I was listening to a Southern paranormal podcast, and I was like, okay, gotta remember them. And I'm glad that I did, because they put on the Strange Realities conference that I've been fortunate enough to attend. So Conspirinormal, a lot like Where Did the Road Go, and their very kind of like chill nature, their conversational style of podcasts. The hosts are Adam and Surfiel, and they both are just really knowledgeable, really smart. They ask really good questions also. And they talk about all kinds of subjects too, everything from like folk magic to the occult to ghosts and cryptids and all of that. So there's a really wide spectrum that gets covered in these podcasts. Again, I just want to reemphasize that. My favorite podcast number 3 is Rune Soup, hosted by Gordon White. Okay, this is dense. This is very dense material, and I said this in my last video, is a little too smart for me, but I still love to listen to it. A tagline that he has used in the past is, it's a podcast discussing magic, culture, and the paranormal. There is a lot of history, a lot of philosophy mixed in there. I think the philosophy in particular is kind of hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes, but I love it. I love it. You just have to be in a mood for Rune Soup, though. You have to be like, I'm ready for a scholastic lecture right now. But I really like the things that Gordon says. This is probably one of the broader podcasts I listen to. Like, he's talked about everything from like plant biology and like foraging, ancient magic and grimoires, and then he'll even talk about, UFOs and stuff. So it goes deep. Favorite podcast number 4 is Mysterious Universe, the Australian guys. They're one of the first paranormal podcast that I came across, and they too will talk about almost anything. Basically, anything that would be mysterious in our universe, they will talk about. And some of it's very kind of lighthearted and funny, and then sometimes it gets kind of dense and mind-blowing, you know? So there's a great spectrum in there. Sometimes they do interviews, but most of the time they talk about independent research they've done. Like they'll have read a book this weekend, they'll tell us what all is in the book, for example. They have a great sense of humor. Production is like fantastic. Quality is fantastic. I love Mysterious Universe, and I would say every episode is worth a listen. I don't think I ever skip a Mysterious Universe episode. And one thing that stands out to me about Mysterious Universe is they will humor you and just talk about the most bizarre stuff. I remember one of the first episodes I listened to was about this guy who claimed to be gang stalked by reptilians, okay? I mean, they'll talk about anything, but I love it. Favorite podcast number 5, Expanded Perspectives, the Texas guys. I love Expanded Perspectives. They too will talk about like anything, like they'll throw in history. Lately they've been pulling a lot of experiencer testimony from online and just sharing that and talking about that. I listen to Expanded Perspectives when I'm looking for something just like, I don't want to say entertainment, but kind of easier to listen to. Because they're just fun. They just have a fun time with it. Not to say they don't have really good points and good thoughts when they're talking on these subjects, but it's just kind of, it's not as dense and hard to digest as some of these other podcasts. Honestly, I'm probably more likely to binge Expanded Perspectives all at once than these other podcasts. They are also really funny. They do some interviews, and they do talk about some independent research. Most of the time they're talking about their independent research, but they've put some great stuff out there. One of my favorite episodes of Expanded Perspectives was when they were talking about the Native American Pukwudgies. Favorite paranormal podcast number 6 is Anything Ghost, hosted by Lex Wall. This is a very simple, straightforward podcast. But part of why I like it is because it's really atmospheric. Lex puts music in there, and he has a really spooky voice. He narrates ghost stories. He narrates ghost stories that people have submitted, and sometimes people submit audio files of their ghost stories, and he'll play those. So it's just a collage of straight up ghost stories. Again, one of the more easy listening. When I'm not looking to question my entire existence on my drive home, I will put on something like Anything Ghost. And I've been just a faithful listener. There's, some ghost stories aren't that exciting and some ghost stories are terrifying, but it's, like I said, very atmospheric. Favorite podcast, number 7, and this is one we will end with, the Higherside Chats, hosted by Greg Carwood. I didn't really, I've never talked to anyone about Higherside Chats, but I didn't realize that some people might call this a controversial podcast, and that's because it's a conspiracy podcast. And not just conspiracy, but they talk about a lot of conspiracy content. I think every episode of Higherside is interviews, and he puts great people on here. There was one that we listened to, he'll talk about anything, so there was one that we listened to that was about cow farming, and then sometimes they're talking about ceremonial magic. He has also a really, really broad spectrum, and he does talk about some sensitive topics, especially in today's polarized world, but I like to listen to everybody and see what everybody has to say. So I've never had my feathers ruffled by a Higherside Chats, but okay, one thing I do want to say about this podcast is it is exceptionally mind-blowing. I'll be listening to it and I'll just be the whole time, right? So it's kind of, again, one of those ones that's, you can't just put it on when you're looking to chill out. You put it on when you're looking to be stimulated. And this is probably the most stimulating one on here. I have a really fun time with Higherside, but you gotta be in a safe place. Okay, so in conclusion, let me just sort these out for you. So the easy listening for fun time is Expanded Perspectives and Anything Goes. The much more dense, hard to digest stuff is Rune Soup and Higherside Chats. And for just like slightly chill but slightly stimulating, good like baseline content, I recommend Where Did the Rogue Go?, Mysterious Universe, and Conspirinormal. And finally, I want to give an honorable mention to a podcast that I just started listening to. Like, I'm trying to cram one more in there, and that is Sasquatch Chronicles. That is like mostly cryptid focused from what I can see, obviously, judging by the title. Wes is the host, and he just does really good, thorough, calm interviews with people who have seen cryptids. And he asks great questions and gets a lot of detail. And it's just really engrossing somehow. It's very well done. And there's my list of my favorite paranormal podcasts, okay? So, in the video I did 4 years ago, I was trying to like put a list in the description of every paranormal podcast ever. Obviously, I think you can't do that. I think that's impossible at this point. So what I will tell you is if you want to see what all is out there, check out my last video I did on this subject and look in the description. There's like hundreds of podcasts listed there. And what I'll ask you to do here is pop a recommendation in the comments. So admittedly, once I found these 7, I kind of latched onto them, and I am struggling to keep up with these 7. So I haven't really explored outside of this small circle in the last couple of years because I know that I like this, and I'm just gonna stay here because exploring adds so much more time that I could be spending listening to the ones that I know I like, if that makes sense. So I've kind of like found my happy place. So I don't know if I'll ever make another video like this, but I did just want to reiterate who my favorites are, and some of them have kind of fallen off. I feel like I've narrowed it down a little bit and like added Higherside in. That's where I'm at, and paranormal podcasts are the only kind of podcast that I listen to, except I will throw in a Degrassi podcast every now and then, but mostly it's just paranormal stuff. And it has probably done wonders for my spiritual development, as silly as that sounds. And it's also just given me such great entertainment. So yeah, I know this is basically just like a straight up replication of the video I did 4 years ago, but I've kind of been wanting to do it, and a couple of y'all asked for it, so I was like, sure, why not? I just winged this, so hopefully I said everything I wanted to say about every podcast on here, but I didn't write a script. So I guess this will be the last time I'm telling you happy Halloween, so happy Halloween. And that concludes this video. Until next time, stay spooky, my friends.